Section 14 of Neighbourhood, A Year's Life in and About an English Village, by Tickner Edwards. Read by Peter Yearsley. July, Part 1. 1. In the spring of the year, July seems as far off as middle age seems to youth, and almost as undesirable. But when Midsummer Day is past and gone, whether in human life or the year's progress, we look at things with clearer, more widely ranging eyes. The man in his prime strength, the season at the summit of its beauty, these are fairer things than the childhood and the springtime that have gone to make them, for the greater must be all the greater and more wonderful, because it contains the wondrous less. Here is the first day of July come, and ever since sunrise I have been straying about the field paths and lanes, wending home, indeed, only when the fierce noontide heat and a ravening hunger combined to drive me thither. There was this fierce tropic quality in the sunlight from the very first. Though the gilt arrow on the church dial pointed barely to 4 o'clock, the level sunbeams struck hot and bright on the face, and the dew in the grass by the lane side was shrinking visibly with every moment. In an hour the last water bell was gone from the shadiest nook in the wood. Only the teasels could defy the thirsty sun, and these kept their water traps over-brimming, as if fed from a magic source, far into the heat of the day. There are many common things of the countryside, small facts to be learned for the trouble of a glance, which are little known because the glance is seldom given. As I passed along the hedge where the teasels stood up straight as a row of church spires, the glitter of the water in their leaf cups caught my eye, and I stopped to look at them. I had always thought of the teasels as natural drinking places for the bees and other flying or creeping things, but now I saw that their use was very different. Studying the plant carefully, the whole meaning of the thing dawned on me at last. The teasel must be a flesh-eater, more greedy and destructive than any spider in the land. In the cups a host of creatures lay drowned, and upon the green translucent leaves and stems there crawled multitudes of others, all destined for the same fate. There were in the water not only small insects, but bumblebees, large caterpillars and slugs, even broad-winged night moths that had fallen to the teasel's snare. I saw also that the pools of water insulating every stem served not as traps alone, but actually as digestive cells, wherein the carcasses of the teasel's prey were gradually resolved into the slime that lay at the bottom of each cup. Somehow, I conjectured, this must be absorbed into the tissue of the plant, and cutting one of the stems asunder, just where the water-holding leaves embraced it, I came upon what seemed proof of this, a ring of apertures at the base of each cup, sink-holes, in fact, leading into the substance of the stem. The path wound up a hillside, over a field of tares, rippling away before me through the sea of purple blossom until it ended abruptly against the blue sky far above. And here another minute wonder brought me to a halt. Though it was so early, the hive bees were out and about in their thousands. The great field was besieged by them. The air throbbed with their music. A madness for honey-making seemed upon them all. And yet, of all the busy thousands upon thousands set loose amidst what seemed illimitable forage ground, nowhere could I see a hive-bee upon a flower. I went down on hands and knees for a closer view, believing at first that my eyes were playing false with me. But there was no doubt about it. Though on every side the great furry bumblebees were seizing upon and dragging open the purple blooms of the tares, the hive bees never touched these, for all they were in so huge a heat and flurry of work. Now I knew that while every other insect under heaven has its times of relaxation, deeming moments given over to dancing in a sunbeam or basking on a wall as moments not ill spent, the honey bee allows herself no such wasteful delights. If she were here in this tare field in her thousands, and here she was, she came for no other purpose than a useful one. Clearly, therefore, the hive bees were getting nectar in abundance. Yet how, if they were not seeking it in the flowers? Another minute's careful watch resolved the mystery. The tare plant can almost rank with the slug-devouring teasel as a curiosity of the countryside. Knowing well that the hive bee's tongue is not long enough to reach the sweets at the bottom of its flower cup, the tare provides a special feast outside. At the base of each leaf and flower stalk, just where these join on to the main stem, will be found a little green flap or fin. In the centre of this fin is a valve from which exudes a thick, sweet liquid. If you are quicker than the bee, you may see the tiny globule shining in the sun as you turn the plant up. But even as you look, a bee fusses in between your fingers, drinks up the liquid in a moment, and hums off to the next stalk. If we can extend no more sympathy to the bee in her folly of never-ending labours than to a lily of the field at toil, we must at least concede something for her fearlessness. A peep into her own looking-glass is not always all of virtue's reward. Over the field of purple tares and on through the cornfields, wheat waving high and green, with the scarlet poppies flushing midway down in its murmuring depths. Who would have hawthorn and buttercups, the bridal white and gold of spring, when he can have poppies by the million, and roses, a wagon load, to be gathered from every hedgerow if he will? Where I stood, breast high in the wheat field, the poppies crowded thick together among the green stems, making one unbroken sheet of colour that I could hardly look upon in the full light of the summer sun. A little way onward, and this blood-red flare was softened instantly. A dozen yards away there was nothing but the rustling green of the wheat. Every moment a lark rose out of the corn, singing, or dropped into it like a stone silently out of the blue. The hedgerow on the far side of the field shone with the roses, tremulous, uncertain in the heated air. Beyond, in the blue mist of woodlands, a blackbird chanted his joy of the morning, and all round me, in the distant ring of hills, there were cuckoos chiming, each note clear but double, some of the songs perfect still. From the wheat the path led me presently into the oat fields, green too, but of a cooler, greyer tinge, and full of a stealthy motion and the sound of wind, though scarce a breath was moving overhead. There is something eerie, mysterious about a field of oats on a hot summer's morning. It is as though the ears bent together and whispered to each other, passing the word on unceasingly from plant to plant. Looking over the plain of grey-green awns stretching away under the still sunshine, you see low wavelets rise and fall, furrows come and go, the light changes, or suddenly the whole expanse grows mute and still. A gentle, inconstant breeze would produce exactly this effect, but you see it when not a leaf moves in the highest tree-tops, when even the aspens have hushed their quivering music under the noontide glare. No doubt, in a minor degree, all plants show this movement, whether it be caused by the travelling heat of the sun, or be simply due to the varying impetus of growth. In a great field of corn, closely drilled, there are always the separate individualities of the plants comprising it, to be reckoned with. That these exist in fact as well as in fancy is difficult to demonstrate, but that each field has a communal spirit, often different from or wholly antagonistic to that of its near neighbour, is evident. For how else to explain why all the ears of corn in one field lean eastward, and all the ears in the next field may incline normally to the west? Coming homeward at last, surfeited of sunshine, eyes and ears out-wearied with the brilliance and the melody of the day, I stopped a while in the shadow of the church tower to consider an old, familiar, yet perennially interesting thing. Just as I, at fiercest noon, was returning to the shelter of my own cool, ivy-mantled nest, the swifts that built in the tower were lancing back to their homes in the gloom of the belfry. Singly, in twos and threes together, every moment saw them arriving and disappearing through the jalousies. But now none went forth again, though they had been coming and going all the morning long. There they would remain, I knew, quiet in the temperate dark of the old tower, until the sun had got out of its furnace-like mood, and then they would be out and about again, yet filled with a wholly different spirit, and towards sunset they would be tearing round the sky in a madcap chevy chase, screaming like black imps let out of Inferno. 2. Windlecombe Mead, where the village cricket matches have been played from time immemorial, lies on the gently sloping ground between Arun River and the hills. It was the day of the great annual match with Staversham, and most of the older villagers had congregated on the benches round the scoring tent, when, in the sweltering heat of early afternoon, I hurried down to the field with pencil and book. The townsmen, it seemed, had won the toss, and had elected to put the home team in. Young Tom Clemmer and young Daniel Dray were already at the wickets, taking middle. I looked round at the glum, set faces of the spectators, and felt tragedy in the air. 4 men and a parson, whispered the old cobbler to me behind his hand. A old rickety chap as can't run, and 5 bits o' lads. Drat their hay. Here, now they're off. The umpire had called play. The fast Staversham bowler, we knew him of old, retired into open country, wheeled, and bore down on the crease like a bull at a gate. Young Daniel ducked, then turned up a face of indignant scarlet. But the ball had gone by for 2, and a chuckle of relief spread through the crowd. The bowler prepared to try again. "Daniel's got the sun in his eyes," said old Dray anxiously, as he watched. "You never can bide that top wicket. Steady now, Danny, and keep a straight bat." He roared out the last words, and then in a moment we were all on our feet in consternation. The ball had never left the bowler's hand. That much we were sure of. Daniel stood at his wicket safe and sound, but Tom Clemmer was coming back to the tent, followed by a derisive chorus from the whole field. "Hout, Tom? Never hout? What in the world houted ye, lad?" "Hout? Never! 'Tis a swindle, Tom." Amidst the eager exclamations of his friends, Tom Clemmer strode into the tent and began slowly to unbuckle his pads. All the time he stared fixedly into space. "I could ha' hupped with my fist," he said, after a moment's wrathful silence, addressing no one in particular, "and I could ha' gi'en that there grocer chap such a... But there, 'tis no sense yammering. Don't you run out, sir, or he'll hae you, same as they had me." He spoke now to the curate, who was preparing to go to the wicket, and the truth dawned upon us at last. The bowler had played Tom a very ancient and very mean-spirited trick. Old Clemmer, regardless of the agony it caused him, stamped his swaddled foot upon the ground. "And to think, Tom," he groaned, as you lit up the forge fire special for un only last Sunday, 'cause he's a old mare." But we had no thought for anything but the disaster that had befallen us, and all that was now imminent. With Tom Clemmer, the one hope of Windlecombe, out of the fight, what might happen to the rest? With bated breath we watched for the third ball. Young Daniel drove it over the bowler's head, and with a trembling pencil I put down 2 to his name. Playing with desperate care, he added 2 more before the end of the over, and we began to pluck up heart again. Young Tom came and stood behind me. His big thumb travelled down the list of names on the scoring book. "'Tis not lost yet," he said, with reviving cheerfulness. "Dan'l may do well, wants to get set, and belike Mr. Weaverly, he'll bide out a bit. Then there be Huggins wi' his luck, and who knows but what the boys'll account for a dozen or so atween 'em." I had now time, as the fielders were accommodating themselves to the left-handed batting of the curate, to glance down the list. The last name came upon me as an utter surprise. "What? Never old Stalwart? Why, he must be 70, if he's a—" "Aye, Captain Stallard, sure enow. 'Tis a joke, more'n anything, but ne'er another living soul there were as could— Oh, Jubbity! Mr. Weaverly's hout, leg afore." But it was not Mr. Weaverly's leg. With a white face, his body bent to the shape of an inverted L, and both arms clasped about his middle, the curate came tiptoeing back to the tent. He sat down silently in a corner. Huggins, a lean, red-whiskered giant in moleskins, burst out into the sunshine and made for the wicket, waving his bat like a war-club and murmuring imprecations as he went. "Now, 'tis just touch and go," said young Tom in my ear. "If 'a hits 'em, they'll travel, you mark me. 'Twill be either the river, the town, or Windle Hill." Huggins stood at the wicket, legs wide apart and bat held high over his head. The bowling now was swift, stealthy, underhand. The ball sped down the pitch, never leaving the grass for an inch. A crack rang out in the dazzling July sunshine. Daniel Dray started to run, but the batsman waved him back. Huggins stood watching the skied ball until it came to ground in the next field. He laughed uproariously. "What d'ye think o' he?" It was another 4, and that made 11 in all. Huggins swung up his bat and spread his great hobnailed boots for a still mightier effort. The ball hissed down the pitch. Huggins caught it as it hopped from a tussock. Like a lark it soared up into the blue, and we heard a clear musical plunk as it dropped into the river. A roar of delight burst from the crowd. "Lost ball!" shouted Tom behind me. 17! Huggins spat upon his hands, took a reef in his leather belt, and lifted his bat again. The little underhand bowler came crouching up to the crease, and launched the new ball almost from his knees. Wide and wild it flew this time, but there was a sound of crashing timber. Huggins's wicket scattered into space, stumps and bails whirling together halfway up the pitch. He had hit the wrong thing. "And now," wailed poor Tom Clemmer, "'tis as good as finished. Dan'l won't ha' no chance. Just as well declare and ha' done it. The boys, they'll all be done in a hover, and—" "Well, and what about the captain, Tom?" It was the voice of the captain himself, and we all turned to look. He was leaning comfortably against the tent pole, the very picture of an old superannuated forecastle hand. He wore his usual vast, faded blue suit. A seaman's cap with hard, shiny peak gripped his bald head from the rear. His red face swam in joviality and perspiration. Tom regarded him with mingled respect and doubt. "You can't run, Master Stallard." "True, Tom." "And you hain't touched a cricket bat for 30 year." "True again," returned the captain serenely. Well, a good plucked un you be, anyways. Now then, Dicky." The first small boy set forth over the sunny stretch of grass that lay between the tent and the waiting team. Very small and insignificant he looked, in his school corduroys, and leg pads that reached well nigh up to his waist. His advent was greeted with ribaldry from all parts of the field. We heard Daniel Dray admonishing the boy as he came smiling up to the pitch. "Now, Dicky, don't you dare run till I shouts to you, and then run as if he were after you. Hold your bat straight, you young varmint. Now then, look out. There, what did I tell you?" Dicky's wicket was down, and Dicky himself was running back to the tent, vastly relieved. "Out with you, Georgie Huggins, and do as well as your father," cried Tom Clemmer encouragingly. "'Tis over, and Dan'l's got the play now. Oh, Dan'l, if only 'twere you and me." But playing with the ingenuity as well as the courage of despair, young Daniel Dray now began to show his true mettle. Odd runs he refused, taking only even numbers, so that each time the bowling fell to his lot again. At the end of the over he stole a desperate single with the same object in view. He reached home safe enough, but Georgie was run out. Boy number 2 had been disposed of at the cost of a gallant 6. Following the same tactics, young Daniel eked out the remaining 3 boys with still more crafty skill. When at length old Stallwood, the last man, launched out into the sunlight to show the town what he remembered of cricket, the score had risen to 49, and our spirits with it. We cheered him lustily as he went. "One more," quoth Tom Clemmer, "just one, and I'll light me pipe. There be allers a chance with 50. Losh, look at the cap'n." 3 times on his way to the pitch he had stopped, turned, and waved his cap in acknowledgment of the ovation given him. And now he was greeting the Stavishamites each by name and shaking hands with the wicket-keeper. He got to the crease at last and grounded his bat. The next moment the whole field had left their places and run for the tent, leaving the captain standing alone and amazed at his wicket. "I don't know about," said Tom. "D'ye understand? I never heerd the bowler shout, and never seed the ball a-comin'. Belike I thinks they be all gone for a drink, to hearten 'em at the sight of such a cricketer." And being free for a time, I took upon myself the task of walking out to the captain and breaking the news to him as gently as I could. It was now Windlecombe's turn to take the field, and Tom Clemmer led out his team with a good heart, in spite of its tale of juveniles. Daniel Dray and the Reverend Mr. Weaverley were our first, indeed our only, bowlers. One of the first batsmen for Stavisham was Daniel's ancient foe, the grocer, and we watched the beginning of play with breathless interest, for we knew Daniel would aim to kill. He grubbed savagely in the sawdust, then sent the first ball hurtling down the pitch. The old men were still upon the benches outside, and in that quarter sympathy with Windlecombe was as staunch as ever. But in the scoring tent I sat amidst enemies now. The townsmen crowded behind me, a humorously sarcastic crew. 50 to beat? My old Aunt Mary! D'ye reckon we'll do it, Bill? Dunno, 'tis serious for Savisham. Only 11 on us there be. Likely March won't do it off his own bat. No, not half. That there Tinker cove's a-going to bowl first. There he goes. What a... The rest was drowned in a thunderclap of shouting. There was a general stampede among the spectators, for the grocer had driven Daniel's first ball clean into the tent. It was a bad beginning for Windlecombe, and bad rapidly changed to worse. Young Daniel bowled steadily and coolly for the first over, in spite of continuous punishment, but thereafter he lost first his temper and then his head. The smiling grocer played him to all points of the compass, and the more the grocer smiled, the more wildly erratic Daniel's bowling grew. As for the Reverend Mr. Weaverley, He could do no more than send meek, ingenuous balls trundling diffidently up the pitch, and he was skied with heart-rending regularity. The batsmen kept continually running. The little tent seemed to belly out on all sides with the cheering, as a sail with wind. 30 up, 30 for nothing, 31, and another, 32, go on, March, what a ways goose, 35, hooray! The shout went off in my ear like a punt gun, and then there fell a sudden silence about me, as all strained eyes and ears out to the field. Some altercation was going on, but not between members of the opposing sides. "Drop out, you old fool!" I heard Tom Clever roar, and, peering over the crowd, I saw Captain Stallwood, ball in hand, walking up to the pitch. He rolled up his sleeves as he came. "Drop out, I tell you!" cried Tom once more. "'Tis cricket we be playing, not marbles, man. Give me that ball, Stallard, or I'll... Lorsh, what be come to the old—" The rest was a confused wrangle amongst the whole team. Presently, to our amazement, we saw all drift back to their posts, and old Stallwood take his place triumphantly at the bowling crease. In the dead quiet that followed, I heard the grocer chuckle richly as he got ready to smite the captain all over the field. The old man stood stock still on the crease, eyeing the batsman solemnly, the ball held low down between his knees. So long he remained in this posture that, at length, impatient exclamations began to break out on all sides. "Well, now you's got 'un, Stallard, let 'un go, mate." "'Tain't i' the church you be, cap'n, 'tis cricket." "Ball up, Gaffer, we wants to get home afore dark." And from the grocer, leaning with exaggerated weariness on his bat, "Don't you be no sort of hurry, old bluebottle. But when you are ready, just send us a postcard, will you?" The captain's hand went slowly up, the ball held curiously against his wrist. He launched it with a sudden sideways twist. As it rose high into the air, I could see that it went wide and off, even from my position in the tent. With a laugh, the batsman strode out 6 yards to meet it. A moment later, he was gazing back aghast at his splayed wicket. The captain's rich, husky voice pealed out above the din, "There be a pound of butter for 'ee." And now we were the frantic spectators of a drama that gained in thrilling interest with every moment. The new batsman arrived at the wicket, and again old Stallwood sent the ball sailing down the pitch, wide as ever, but this time to leg. I watched it more carefully now. Though it made a high curve, it rose not a hair's breadth after touching ground, but shot straight in. Again we saw the glint of a falling bail behind the wicket. The captain thrust both bare arms deep in his trouser flaps and silently grinned. The third man did little better. He succeeded in blocking a couple of the balls, but the next, more crooked than any, sent him dumbfounded back to the tent. There was no more ribaldry about me now. The fourth batsman sallied out amidst a rustle of whispered apprehension and hard-drawn breaths, and returned almost immediately to the same tense atmosphere. Outside, on the benches, the old men were rocking on their seats with delight, like trees in a wind. Bleak, the cobbler, was careering up and down, beside himself with joy. "4 in over!" he shouted. "I reckons I knows summat about leather, but I ne'er see it do the like o' that. 'Tain't bowling, I tell you, 'tis magic." And now young Daniel Dray was bowling again, and bowling with renewed courage and skill. All his old command of length and break had returned to him. By the end of his over another wicket had fallen, and the score had risen no higher than 43. The captain took the ball once more, this time without any opposition. At once the fearsome whispering in the tent grew still. Almost we forgot to breathe, as the great dark hairy fist came slowly up into the sunlight. But the captain had changed his tactics. Instead of the leisurely, high-curving delivery with which he had done such execution hitherto, the ball left his hand straight and low, and as quick as light. It pitched no more than an inch or two in front of the waiting bat, then struck vertically upward. A crack resounded through the field. The batsman staggered, clapped a hand to his head. A moment more, and he was picking an uneven course towards the tent, thoroughly satiated with the captain's magic. Very slowly the next man set out for the pitch. He stopped on the way to tighten a strap of his leg guard, and again unconscionably long to adjust his batting glove. Once he turned back a tallowy face, and seemed to be in two minds about something. But at length he got to the wicket and grounded his bat. The long arm uprose again, and the ball sped. It proved to be the last bowled that day, for once more that terrible upward break ended with a thud and a yell, echoed from 9 panic-stricken men about me. The luckless batsman fled with as gory a visage as his companion had done, and none would take his place, though the Gracer charmed and stormed never so wisely. Windlecombe had won by 6. Later by an hour the victorious 11 gathered in the parlour of the Three Thatchers Inn, old Stalwart grimly smiling in their midst. Tom Clemmer shook his fist at him, delight in his eyes. "But 'twa'n't cricket, Stallard," he said reproachfully. "No," returned the old man, "not cricket, leastways, not all on it. That there sing-ching summat or other, red-hot balls I calls 'em, that were a trick as I learned in Cheney." End of section 14.
Please subscribe to update new videos. Please share and like if you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much.